President Trump, as I mentioned a moment ago, he started this Monday with a bang, literally by announcing major news. The president declared a public safety emergency in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. And of course, there have been, for a long time, all sorts of violent crime taking place, but it seems lately there's just been a string of high-profile violent crimes that have rocked the city, including the botched hijacking attempt where a former Doge member was brutally attacked. But the question is, what's the legal reasoning behind all of this? And I don't know of anyone better suited to discuss this than Ken Cuccinelli. He's former Attorney General of Virginia. He currently serves as a senior fellow for Homeland Security and Immigration at the Center for Renewing America. Ken, welcome back to Washington Watch. It's an honor to have you. Thanks for coming on.
Good to be with you as always, Jody.
All right, so let's talk about this declaration, the president declaring a crime emergency here in the District of Columbia. Do you agree with him? Is it good direction where he's going here?
Certainly,
what's your thoughts?
Jody, we all remember back in the campaign, he was talking about how out of control cities were getting on the criminal front and that he was going to confront it. Well, there is no city in America where he has more legal authority to do that than Washington, D.C., the nation's capital, because it's not a state. It is a federal district under the Constitution. There is an awful lot of federal authority available to him, and he's using a good bit of it. He's got the Metropolitan Police now under Attorney General Bondi's control for the next 30 days, and he's mobilizing 800 National Guardsmen, both of which are indisputably within his authority to do. And we will see how effective they are at reducing crime in Washington, D.C. And the president is very determined about this, not just in Washington, but around the country. But as I said, Washington, D.C. is the city where he has the most legal authority to act. And so he is, as is his habit, taking full advantage of it.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because that was one of my first. I know Washington, D.C. is a federal city, and there's constitutionally Congress and the government, the federal government has jurisdiction. But I also know that a lot of that has been given back through home rule back to the city government of Washington, yes. D.C. So I'm glad you brought up the legal underpinnings that support this executive order. So you feel very confident that the president is solely within his legal jurisdiction to do this.
Well, not only do I, Jody, the mayor of D.C. has already conceded, look, I have to obey this order. I don't have any other choice. So when you have a local Democrat mayor conceding the legal point, I think that that makes it clear the president is on very firm ground, indisputable ground. And I would point out as a former Virginia attorney general that, the crime coming out of D.C. is a long-time problem. It is a regional source of crime, and that hasn't really abated. There's a lot of people. You look at the Washington Post, for instance, today will say, "Well, crime's at its lowest in however long." That's a real debatable question in Washington, D.C. And the murder rate is high. There's plenty of violent crime there. It's a nation's capital, and the president wants it to be a showcase of a city in America, not just good enough. And he's putting his money where his mouth is.
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking over this order earlier today, Ken, and it references Section 740 of the District of Columbia Self-Government and Governmental Organizational Act. Can you explain what that is?
Sure. So as you mentioned, Jody, and for viewers, Washington, D.C. has only had what's called home rule for the last 50 years or so. And before that, it was simply managed as a federal district. It now has a city council and a mayor and so forth. But in establishing what's called home rule, Congress maintains certain federal powers. For example, the Congress can override Washington, D.C. laws, as they did 2 years ago. Andrew Clyde, your former colleague from Georgia, led that effort to get rid of, some soft on crime legislation that they had passed. And it was it was so bad that even Democrats on Capitol Hill supported getting rid of it. So those kinds of federal levers continue to exist. And one of them is the authority of the president on the declaration of an emergency. And the president declared an emergency based on crime today to take over the Metropolitan Police for a period of 30 days. Now, if Congress acts, that can be longer than 30 days. But of course, the president can also bring to bear law enforcement officers from the Department of Justice, the Department of Homeland Security in certain respects, and so forth. So there's an awful lot of available federal buttressing of the law enforcement situation that's available to the president that is not available to the mayor of Washington, D.C. under the home rule statutes that Congress put in place 52 years ago, if I remember correctly.
Okay, well, let's kind of break this down. What you say he has control of the D.C. Metro Police Department for 30 days. All right, what is this going to look like? I would imagine it's going to be a pretty busy 30 days for this administration to put a lot of things in order.
That's what I would expect. Attorney General Bondi has been delegated the president's authority to lead the department effectively. And so the Metropolitan Police will take instructions from the Attorney General now. And she, of course, also has authority over all of the law enforcement officers of the Department of Justice, whether that's the marshals or the FBI, DEA, and so forth, and many of which have jurisdiction in D.C., meaning if you're the Drug Enforcement Agency, all you have to be doing is pursuing the violation of drug laws and you have jurisdiction. FBI has general jurisdiction. Again, remember, DC isn't a state. So where the FBI might need some interstate element of crime in Virginia to have jurisdiction, they don't need that in Washington, D.C. They can literally act as local cops if that's what the president and the attorney general choose to do. So I do expect the next 30 days to be a lot busier, hopefully productive, of rounding up people who've been committing crimes with relative ease in Washington, D.C. And we'll all be able to celebrate a safer Capitol come 30 days. Now, I would say this isn't the 30 and done. I'm sure the president is looking at this long term, but he does have that 30-day control position over the Metropolitan Police that reverts back to D.C. in the absence of congressional action. So it's going to be a busy 4 weeks or so.
Yeah, I agree with you. And very interesting, your comments there, Ken. I really appreciate that. But beyond the Metropolitan Police, as you mentioned, there are other law enforcement options, such as the National Guard. You mentioned about 800 of them. What will they be tasked with? What will they be doing?
So you can expect, just like in L.A., that they tend to be supportive. While the president can use them for law enforcement, he has not so far done that. But he has that option, not just in D.C., but there's a lawsuit being tried today in San Francisco on his deployment of the National Guard in California. And he has broad authority in that respect. And it's something where you can expect, I think he's going to win that case. He'll lose in front of this judge. It's a left-wing San Francisco judge. But the Ninth Circuit will undoubtedly give the president the win. And that's going to solidify his authority to use similar tactics in any city in the country. But again, in D.C., because he has additional authority, because it's a federal district, he's starting here, which is what I would do operationally if I were him. I think it's very smart. And it is incumbent on him to perform, if you will, meaning on Attorney General Bondi and the whole team to show results, which will legitimize from a policy and political standpoint his aggressiveness with other cities other than Washington, D.C. So I look forward to that success.
Well, it's absolutely fascinating, and I want to thank you, Ken Cuccinelli, for your valuable insight into this major executive order from the Trump administration today. Deeply appreciate you joining us on Washington Watch, and
always good to be with you, Jody.